I do have some upcoming courses that I'd love to tell you about. On Wednesday, March 15th, we're going to have movement behavior and health outcomes among sedentary adults with Frederick Aripa. On Wednesday, March 22nd, we're going to have reimagining job quality measurement with Jenny Weisbound, MBA, MPA. And our next webinar for industrial hygiene is going to be on Tuesday, April 11th on protecting workers from the danger of heat. Evidence-based approaches to heat stress management with Margaret Morrissey, PhD, with the New York, New Jersey Occupational Safety and Health Center. You can learn more about these webinars and register for upcoming events at coeh.berkeley.edu/about-CE. And on behalf of education and research centers throughout the country, it is my pleasure to present our Industrial Hygiene webinar series. This is a collaborative effort on behalf of each ERC's continuing education program, and our goal is to provide access to current research supported through the NIOSH ERC programs. We appreciate you all tuning in and joining us today. Today's webinar, Colorado State University Industrial Hygiene Program Training Needs Analysis, is presented by Jillian Moore, MS, M.Ed, in the Colorado School of Public Health. Few housekeeping announcements. You are going to be muted during today's presentation. If you'd like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A. We prefer the Q&A over the chat as it's easier for me to keep track of which questions have been asked and answered during the presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and will be made available on the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page, and you'll receive a link to the recording tomorrow following once it's live and up. All participants who logged in with their registration email for the full live presentation today via Zoom will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the evaluation form, and that'll qualify you for a certificate of completion with 1 continuing education contact hour. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. And at this time, it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter today. Jillian Moore, MS, M.Ed, is a fall 2022 graduate of the Environmental Health and Industrial Hygiene Master's program at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. Prior to pursuing this degree and career change, she worked as a process engineer in the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma and Texas for several years. During that time, she became interested in occupational safety and operational learning, completing a degree in adult education and training at CSU before starting the IH program. Jillian has held training positions in a variety of energy industries and currently works as an environmental coordinator for DCP Midstream in Greenlee, Colorado. She is interested in improving the safety, performance, and satisfaction of workers at all levels of industrial organizations through well-designed experiential learning opportunities, both within organizations and academic training programs. Thank you so much for joining us, Jillian. We're looking forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Realized I forgot to unmute myself. So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar today. As Michelle said, my name is Jillian Moore. I recently graduated from CSU with my master's in industrial hygiene. And today I'm going to talk to you about my thesis research project, which was a training needs analysis for the graduate industrial hygiene program at CSU. My advisor, Dr. Bill Brazil, had been interested in doing something like this for a while. And so between my background in adult education and the research restrictions we faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, this was a really good fit for me and allowed me to graduate in a reasonable amount of time. So before I jump in, I'd like to note that the final slide will have my contact information, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or provide resources related to this project after the webinar. And as Michelle said, if you are thinking of questions during the presentation, feel free to hold them or put them in the, not the chat, what did she say, the Q&A, and there should be plenty of time to answer some questions at the end. So let's see. First, I'd like to tee up this presentation by pointing out its relevance in relation to the goals of NIOSH and education and research centers, since most of you in this audience are likely part of an ERC in some form or fashion. As stated in the first quote, Part of NIOSH's mission is to train the next generation of occupational safety and health practitioners and researchers. Specifically, ERCs play a significant role in preparing the future OSH workforce to respond to new challenges posed by the changing nature of work. So to ensure that our graduates are capable of meeting the evolving needs and challenges of our national workforce, it's important that we continuously evaluate and improve upon our training programs. So one way of doing this is to perform a formal needs assessment that will help inform how you design your courses. And so that first part, the needs assessment, is what we'll talk about today. Additionally, for this audience, I've developed the following learning objectives. So after this presentation, I hope that you are able to, 1, define the purpose of a curriculum crosswalk and explain how it could be performed for an academic occupational health program. 2, summarize the steps of qualitative data analysis for interview and survey data. And 3, discuss the benefits and challenges of the presented needs analysis and consider how you could use the needs analysis in your context. So without further ado, we will jump in. So as previously mentioned, a primary goal of occupational and public health training programs is to produce graduates that are capable of meeting the dynamic and emerging needs of the industries that they support. However, there are growing concerns about graduates' capabilities, both locally with informal discussions between CSU industrial hygiene faculty and industry professionals indicate the need for an enhanced curriculum. And then there are also concerns nationally. And so we found a white paper published by the American Industrial Hygiene Association in 2019. So this white paper surveyed hiring managers, recent graduates, and academics, and over 50% of the hiring managers stated that finding qualified EHS or environmental health and safety professionals is a concern for them. So given this information, we decided to conduct a comprehensive needs analysis of the CSU Industrial Hygiene program to systematically identify program weaknesses and recommend improvements. So the research question we posed was, what gaps exist between industry needs, accreditation criteria, and the current curriculum for the CSU Industrial Hygiene Master's program? So, all right. My assumption is that some of you in this audience are potentially interested in performing a needs assessment for your own program. So I'm going to focus a bit more heavily on the methods than I normally would. So let's first take a look at the image on the left side of the screen. This is the ADDIE model of instructional design. This is one of the most common models of instructional design, and it's often used as a basis for other models. And so you may have seen this or something very similar before. What I want you to understand from this model today is that the instructional design process is never complete. We should always be evaluating the effectiveness of our training, assessing the needs of our students and their future professions, and revising our lessons to meet those needs. So it's a very circular sort of design process. The needs analysis that we did for this research project unsurprisingly falls within the analyze step of the ADDIE model. So we chose to explore our research question in 2 phases. In phase 1, we performed a curriculum crosswalk in order to evaluate internal alignment between our program curriculum and accreditation requirements. While in phase 2, we looked externally and gathered data from industry professionals and alumni through interviews and surveys. So by doing both of these things together, we felt that this enabled us to gain a relatively complete picture of program needs from multiple perspectives. So looking at phase 1, The primary purpose of a curriculum crosswalk is to assess the alignment between accreditation requirements, course objectives, and course assessments, as you can see on the image on the bottom of the screen. So essentially, we should be able to draw a direct line between every course project, exam, and homework assignment to a corresponding course learning objective, which should in turn align with one or more accreditation requirements. So this alignment is what my research partner likes to call the golden thread that ties everything together. The secondary purpose of a curriculum crosswalk is to support the accreditation or reaccreditation process. So for any of you who are heavily involved in ABET or similar accreditation processes at your institution, you likely understand that it can be an enormously cumbersome process to collect all of the proof that your courses are meeting all of the accreditation requirements. And you're not alone in feeling that way. In my literature search, I found that there are a growing number of post-secondary STEM programs that are either considering or have already let their ABET accreditation lapse, in large part because the process is so time-consuming and cumbersome. So as we'll see in the following slides, the curriculum crosswalk process will create documentation that can be used to support reaccreditation and hopefully make it a little bit easier overall. Right. So in developing the curriculum crosswalk and my methods here, I talked extensively with one of my committee members, Dr. Jill Zarestki, who has expertise in post-secondary STEM education. So she recommended that I review an openly available resource from Texas A&M's Center for Teaching Excellence, and it's called the Program Redesign Model. And so it has a section on curriculum crosswalks that definitely helped get me started. And I would recommend it to any of you who are interested in doing this kind of process as well. So after reviewing this resource and performing a quick literature search, I found that there really isn't a one set method for doing a curriculum crosswalk. And there are actually no published curriculum maps or crosswalks for industrial hygiene programs. So I decided that for our needs that I would develop a set of Excel-based spreadsheets for each of our 9 core industrial hygiene courses. And so I'll quickly walk through an example of one of these on the next slide. But before we do that, I also want to talk about the actionable portion of this method, which involved gathering, working with faculty so that they could evaluate their courses using the developed templates. It was strongly desired for our core industrial hygiene faculty to be able to perform these evaluations independently. So my research partner and I spent some time developing a comprehensive set of instructions to support the process. When we received evaluation data back from faculty, however, we found that there was significant confusion and inconsistency in their evaluations. So what I ended up doing was having a follow-up meeting with most of the faculty. So I facilitated the evaluation process, and I found that it worked quite a bit better, and we were able to answer questions right in the moment. So for the 2 courses that were taught by out-of-department faculty, I elected to perform facilitated evaluations from the beginning, and I found that this process provided more consistency and was more efficient, especially in terms of the time required from faculty. And so I definitely recommend for the future that I will be performing facilitated evaluations, and I would recommend that others do as well, at least until the faculty are much more familiar with this evaluation process. So this slide shows an example of one of the completed curriculum maps. And the first row in blue and the first column in green I pre-populated course objectives and assessments based on the course syllabus. And I did ask faculty to add any additional assessments that might not be included in the syllabus. Then the red and yellow sections, this is where the evaluation happens. So faculty basically are going to look at each homework assignment or test and match it with corresponding course objectives. And then, so once all of those were matched up, we also asked faculty to determine the level of understanding that they expected students to achieve from the assignment using a 3-tiered framework, which I'll explain on the next slide. So as you can see here, this is an intro class, and so we have a lot of B's and I's, and I will tell you what those mean on this slide. So let me make sure I have my notes. So let's start by looking at the left side of this image, if I can find my mouse. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy or Bloom's levels of learning. So this is a commonly used method for assessing student learning, and it is particularly useful for evaluating learning progression throughout a curriculum. My research partner and I felt that asking faculty to discern between all 6 of these levels was unnecessary and likely confusing for this project. So after some research, we adapted the following 3-tiered framework from an ABET workshop, and we called it the BIM Level of Achievement Framework. So we defined each level as described here and asked faculty to evaluate the level of learning or understanding that they expected students to achieve with each assignment. So that's where you see a B, that's indicative of beginner level. And to give you just a quick run through of each level, the beginner level corresponds with Bloom's levels 1 and 2, remember and understand. And this is essentially foundational knowledge that will be used or applied in the future. So beginner level assignments are typically used when introducing students to a new topic and may ask them to do things like define terminology or list the steps of a process. Then the next level, the intermediate level, corresponds with Bloom's levels 3 and 4, apply and analyze. At this level of understanding, students should begin to apply the foundational knowledge learned at the beginner level and explore connections at a deeper level. Common intermediate level assignments might include a hands-on lab and subsequent analysis of the results. So finally, the master level, which does not necessarily have to be achieved in an academic curriculum. This corresponds with Bloom's levels 5 and 6, evaluate and create. At this highest level of understanding, students should be able to independently tackle novel problems and use their knowledge and experiences to ask critical questions. So when I think of master level assignments, I think of things like dissertation projects, internships, or class projects that involve working with a real business to solve a problem that they're facing. So in summary, by evaluating assignments through the lens of this framework, we should be able to get an idea for how students are progressing through a variety of skill sets, both within a single course and across the whole curriculum. So after working through the curriculum mapping process with faculty, I compiled the data and looked for gaps across the curriculum as well as in each individual course. Because our program already meets accreditation requirements for both ABET and BCSP, Board of Certified Safety Professionals, we didn't expect to find very many gaps. So the only accreditation criteria that was not directly addressed in any course objective throughout the 9 courses that we looked at was ABET program criteria 6.3.10, attain professional certification. As anticipated, we found 0 gaps in between BCSP criteria and course objectives. Additionally, we found 0 gaps between course objectives and course assessments. This result was also expected because faculty should be designing assignments that meet their course objectives. So overall, we only found 1 gap. And so my recommendation to address this gap is to add an appropriate learning objective to a core course with corresponding content about the process and requirements for common professional certifications in our field. So for industrial hygienists, that means a certified industrial hygienist qualification and a certified safety professional qualification. So this is I think a pretty easy thing to add to our curriculum. So next, we'll move on to talking about phase 2 of the needs analysis, which consisted of group interviews and alumni surveys. For our group interviews, we chose to interview members of the CSU Industrial Hygiene Advisory Board during their semi-annual board meeting in March of 2021. This population was selected because of convenience, as well as participant familiarity with the industrial hygiene program and its goals. So a total of 12 board members participated, and this group had a broad range of experience in industry, consulting, and academia. So because this meeting occurred during the height of the pandemic, we elected to meet on Zoom and facilitated small group discussions using the breakout room feature. We recorded each discussion with participant consent and generated transcripts of the recorded meeting. We generated transcripts of the recorded meetings for analysis, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. For each group, we posed 1 question, which is written in orange on the slide, and that is, what performance problems, both technical and non-technical, have you seen in recent industrial hygiene graduates? So by asking this question, we wanted to be as broad as possible and ensure that participants considered both soft skills and traditional industrial hygiene skills. The other thing that we did in this phase of the project was that we collected data from alumni surveys. So we obtained IRB permission to use previously collected data from surveys that are sent to industrial hygiene students in all of our industrial hygiene students, and then the industrial hygiene students that are part of our ERC, which is the Mountain and Plains ERC. So these surveys get sent out, I think, on the order of every 3 years. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to collect 4 years worth of surveys. And yeah, so while there are some advantages in being able to look at these responses over time, one disadvantage is that we didn't have an opportunity to follow up with participants and ask clarifying questions like we did in the interviews. And additionally, there is likely some overlap of respondents across the individual surveys because our IH alumni can also be MAP ERC alumni. So it's possible that there's overlap, but because the data came to us de-identified, we don't know the extent of this issue. So I just made a note of it. And so next we'll talk about the qualitative data analysis. So I'm coming from an assumption that a lot of people in this particular presentation may not be maybe familiar with qualitative analysis, but may not have actually gone through the process before. So there are many ways that you can perform a qualitative data analysis, but the basic process I've listed here is to perform an iterative review of your data, which in our case is interview transcripts and survey responses, to identify common themes. So taking a look at the blue image in the bottom right corner, we're essentially taking each transcript, picking out individual pieces, and then sorting these pieces into groups based on similarity. So hopefully this helps you visualize what we're doing. So then the rest of the slide, I've broken down the analysis project that we used for our project into the 4 steps shown on the slide. So for our initial review, we performed a content analysis where we combed through the transcripts and identified individual skills and divided them into our pre-identified themes of technical and soft skills. Let's see, so next, we focused on refining the soft skills data with a thematic analysis. So this is because soft skills, unlike technical skills, were not necessarily directly called out in the data. So for example, an interview participant might not have directly identified leadership as a necessary skill, but instead they might have talked about the need for young professionals to take on increasing levels of responsibility, which definitely falls into the category of leadership. So for this process, I relied heavily on my research partner's expertise in qualitative data analysis and soft skills. So she really combed through, she spent many iterations combing through the data and trying to tease apart all of the soft skills into what we have for our final results. So after these 2 reviews, then she and I met up. We were the 2 reviewers. And so we had a reviewer alignment meeting. And so we compared notes on the skills that we found within the technical and the soft skills theme. And we found that there was some significant differences in how we had identified certain skills. So based on my experience as a process engineer, I felt that skills like critical thinking and business communication belonged squarely in the technical skills theme, while Molly felt strongly that these skills belonged in the soft skills theme based on her research and experience. So after some considerable debate, we decided to develop a 3rd theme called applied skills. So this accounts for skills that require elements of both technical and soft skills in order to, be successfully applied in the real world. So after creating this 3rd theme, we combed through the data one more time to recategorize the skills into our 3 themes: technical, applied, and soft skills. And we also provided contextual evidence to support this. So this table here, I know it's a little bit blurry and you don't need to actually read what's in it. This shows a small example of what our final qualitative data analysis looked like. So the leftmost column contains the individual skills that we identified, in this case, ventilation and alternative sampling. And then the middle column shows the theme that we categorized these skills into. So in this case, ventilation and alternative sampling are both technical, so they belong with that theme. Finally, this rightmost section shows the contextual evidence used to support each identified skill. So this consists of quotes pulled directly from the transcripts and survey data. We de-identified all of this data and color-coded it based on which interview or survey it came from, so that we could use it in our write-up as support. So in addition to supporting our analysis, this contextual evidence will be beneficial in helping faculty to understand the specific items that need to be addressed when redesigning their courses. So instead of just telling a professor, hey, you need to include aerosols and ventilation in your curriculum, we can actually go and see, what a particular interview participant was talking about, and what they thought was important when they were talking about the need for ventilation skills. Right. So after going through that process, we'll finally get to the part that many of you have been waiting for, which are the results of our qualitative analysis. As you can see, we have our 3 skills listed across the top: technical, applied, and soft skills. And in the technical skills section, we identified needs for coursework in aerosols and ventilation, coverage of non-OSHA standards and regulations, and a handful of special topics that were brought up in the surveys that I didn't get a chance to fully flesh out. And then we're going to skip over the middle section for a minute and go to the soft skills. So these include a variety of interpersonal skills, such as conflict management and dealing with resistance, collaboration and negotiation, and building relationships. So these skills are particularly important in our field because industrial hygiene and EHS professionals are often trying to persuade managers and frontline workers to take actions to improve safety and health, whether it's paying for new PPE or convincing workers to follow a new safety procedure. So let's see. Additional soft skills identified in the data were self-directed learning and management. And there was significant discussion about what this meant in the paper. And then the other 2 soft skills identified were leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think it's fairly evident when you look at all of these soft skills that these are beneficial not just in industrial hygiene and EHS professions, but they're beneficial across virtually all disciplines and types of work. So these are skills that everyone needs nowadays, for sure, and that businesses are increasingly focused on finding employees who have these skills already. So now we can look at the middle column on applied skills, and hopefully you can see, as I explain these, how these require both technical and soft skills in order to be successfully applied in the workplace. So these include business skills, such as building a business case, managing a project, and communicating both orally and through technical writing. Applied skills also include critical thinking and problem solving, real-world application, and adult education and training. This is something that is important specifically for safety professionals because we are often in charge of translating OSHA requirements, teaching workers how to successfully follow OSHA requirements and wear certain types of PPE, etc. So I have a number of recommendations in my write-up, but I'm happy to share those with whoever is interested. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to go over a handful that I think you might be interested in. So the first recommendation is to add a ventilation course to the core curriculum. So we do have ventilation and aerosols courses that are electives right now, but the advisory board strongly recommended that this be incorporated into the core curriculum, and they were actually very surprised that it wasn't already. This was made increasingly important by the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of EHS professionals were asked to perform some type of ventilation assessment. So this is definitely a core skill needed for both industrial hygienists and EHS professionals. The second recommendation was to add a lab component to the safety course to encourage application of knowledge. So in our course, now I went to school during the pandemic, so we weren't able to do as many hands-on things anyway. But the course that we currently have is mostly lecture-based with some assignments that involve, finding various OSHA violations on construction sites and things. But for me personally, I know that as a safety professional, I'm going to have to actually manage different OSHA programs like Lotto, and maybe ensure that scaffolding is built correctly. And so I really like having hands-on practice before I'm asked to manage something. So I think it would be beneficial to add a lab component, get that experiential knowledge on, for example, measuring different scaffolding, or for lockout tagout, actually placing locks on a system and testing it to make sure that your process was adequate. So then the third recommendation that I had was to develop assignments to build and communicate a business case to management. This is something that the board has brought up previously and still feels strongly that being able to communicate a business case is an essential skill for IH and EHS professionals. And based on my experience in industry, it definitely is. Managers want to know your return on investment, and they want the bottom line to be communicated fairly quickly. So this is definitely a place where we can improve. Then I have 3 more recommendations. The fourth is to provide training for students on effective team and project management strategies. So I'm sure that whether you are a student, a former student, or faculty member, group projects can be a real hassle and a pain. So I think the method that I have experienced most commonly is I'm placed in a group and I'm given a goal and I'm told to go. But if what we're wanting students to learn from team projects is how to effectively work in a team, then I think it's prudent to train students for how to work in a team. Things like project management, strategies, and different ways that resources that you can use. And then also maybe touch on how to manage differing opinions and conflict in groups, because that is commonly an issue. So then the 5th recommendation is to provide faculty training for topics like DEI, instructional design for soft skills, and evaluation of soft skills. So for our faculty, we have a fairly small program at CSU, and currently our faculty consist of all white males. And so they have, while they're interested in and they want to learn themselves about diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, they do feel some hesitancy when asked to train their students on these topics. So I think providing them some training would be helpful. I also think that our faculty are very highly trained in statistics and sampling methods and a lot of hard skills related to their profession. And while they have to use soft skills, there's no formal instruction on developing soft skills, and there's probably even less out there for how to incorporate soft skills development into existing assignments. So I think that instructional design that talks about how to incorporate soft skills would be beneficial, as well as how to evaluate these soft skills. that it's, it's one thing, like with the team projects, it's one thing to ask students to work in a group, but then how do you evaluate how successful they are in working with other people and communicating and things like that. So the final recommendation that I have listed here is to use case studies to explore things like new regulations, ethics, and DEI topics. So I personally love case studies. I think it helps bring the real world into the classroom in a safe way. So you can ask, and you can use this for so many different topics. And I think that it helps students understand what their profession actually looks like in the real world. And it's a good thought experiment to consider how you would approach some of the issues that are brought up in case studies. And then you can actually read how it turned out in the end. And so, like I said, I have these 6 recommendations here, but I have many more opinions based on our results that are included in our write-up, and would be happy to share those. So now we're getting close to the end here. And so I wanted to wrap this up by summarizing some of my thoughts about the needs analysis process as a whole. So some of the benefits to this process is that it provides a methodological framework and supporting documentation for meeting reaccreditation. So I talked about this in the phase 1, the curriculum crosswalk method section. And so hopefully you can, especially if you're involved in reaccreditation, you can see how this can be used there. Another benefit is that a needs analysis enables continuous improvement of your training program. So I think it's helpful for faculty to be able to visualize their courses on the curriculum maps and consider redesigning their objectives and assignments to better match their intent and goals. And in our process, we did, when I walked with faculty through the curriculum mapping process, some of them did actually make some notes that they wanted to tweak certain things to better address their objectives, or even create a different objective. Then the third benefit for a needs analysis is that it provides a rationale for educational solutions. So hopefully you've seen that today. And then the final benefit is that it ensures, the final one that I have listed here is that it ensures that graduates are meeting industry expectations. And so one thing I want to point out with our method is, although group interviews and the qualitative data analysis process is very time consuming, we found that this process uncovered essential workplace skills that are not covered within the current accreditation requirements. So if we're focusing solely on accreditation, we're missing a large set of skills that industry professionals think are very important in the workplace. So now let's touch on a few challenges. For the curriculum crosswalk, I think as I mentioned in my slide, there was considerable inconsistency and variability in faculty evaluation. It was a time-consuming process, and there may be some difficulty in tracking current and future evaluations. So in my literature search, I did find these are, especially the last 2, were mentioned in a handful of other curriculum crosswalks that were done for similar programs. So this is just something to consider if you want it to be an ongoing process. And then I think in order to address the inconsistency and variability, I think I have this on the next slide, that it's going to be important to provide additional training to faculty in the future. And so then looking at the challenges with the interviews and surveys, again, this was also a time-consuming process, especially analyzing the data the way that we did it. And then with any qualitative data, There are many potential sources of bias, including the researcher's experience, focus, and training. This was very apparent between myself and my research partner, and I think it was good that we had a balance between us. And then another source of bias is really dependent on the particular respondents and participants in your interviews and surveys. This can really influence the direction of discussion. Depending on the time that you do it, it can bring up different things that are present in the industry at the time, like COVID-19 was very present during our discussion. So there was a lot, we talked about ventilation a lot, and we talked about the need for new employees to be independent, because a lot of them were starting new jobs working at home. So finally, a few future considerations specific to this project. For the curriculum crosswalk, I would recommend consulting with a curriculum design expert. This is something that was also reflected in the literature. So at CSU, we have a learning center on campus that I think we could use. And we also have an instructional designer in our department that I would probably ask to be involved in the future. I would also provide additional training on our level of achievement framework and consider incorporating relevant learning experiences like internships and research into the curriculum maps. This is something that's also recommended in that Texas A&M resource. And then future considerations for the interviews and surveys was to conduct regular interviews to gather opinions from additional participants, account for the evolving needs of the profession over time, and then gain feedback on the effectiveness of the implemented learning solutions from previous interviews. So for example, if we work really hard in trying to encourage students to build a business case, then we want to be able to ask industry professionals, are students actually able to do this when it's asked of them? Or do we need to, once again, revamp how we are teaching our students? So I know I threw a lot at you, but I guess finally, I want to acknowledge the Mountain and Plains ERC, which supported my research and my time in the program, my committee, Drs. Brazil, Reynolds, and Zareski, my research partner, Molly, and all of the people who participated in this project, which was our faculty, the board members that were interviewed, and the alumni that were surveyed. And with that, I will probably leave this slide up. And like I said, you can feel free to contact me. And if my email's not available, then you can contact my advisor. And with that, thank you for listening, and I'll now take any questions.
Thank you so much for sharing your results with us. I really appreciate your time today. At this time, learners, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the online Q&A box, and I'm happy to ask them. Our first question, is your work published? And if so, can you provide the citation or a link to the publication?
It is not currently published. It was a lot. I started a new job the same semester I defended, so we are going to be working on it soon. But yeah, not right now.
Awesome, thank you. Do you integrate any intern programs or internships into your curriculum?
Our master's program does not require internships for people who are doing a thesis track, and if they've had a certain number of years of experience in industry. This is something that we did talk about in the recommendations a little bit, but that might be a challenge for our program in particular.
Thank you. I'm also curious in relation to your survey respondents, did you find any particular educational gaps in relation to certain age brackets? Did you ask, I guess, the age of the career professionals, for example, were they early career, mid-career, and did that have any impact on what they determined gaps in skills were?
So I think what you're asking is the experience of our interview participants. And so we did have a variety of people from, people who graduated from our program within the past 5 years to mid-career professionals to senior consulting professionals. And so I think we got a wide variety of opinions. Um, Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And do you have any specific case studies that you can point to specifically related to DEIB that you've seen related to safety?
Ooh, so whoever asked that question, I would love to correspond with you offline. I don't have any that come to the top of my head right now, but I did in my undergraduate program. We explored a lot of ethics related studies, and so I have a few ideas, but yeah, I would love to correspond about that later.
Thank you. And we also have a couple of comments. Thank you so much for what you do to help promote and improve programs in the graduates. And great job.
Okay, well, thank you.
Another question. So these curriculum updates are excellent start to benefiting future students. Did your research highlight any educational gaps that be well suited for continuing education for folks who may have already graduated? Or is that a gap that can be filled through continuing education?
That's an interesting question. That wasn't a big consideration during this research, but I do think it is something that we probably could go back and consider for the future.
And in terms of the involvement with your faculty and program and in the curriculum walk, after presenting your findings, how receptive were folks in updating their courses, content, integrating the suggestions? Did you find any quick wins or anything that identified like much more work needs to be done to progress in certain areas? Anecdotal feedback that you might have for folks who are looking at doing a similar process in their programs?
Yes. So one thing I will say is that being a student in the program, given this particular project, the goals of the project, I did not wade into that territory of trying to have faculty make changes. This is really just reporting initial results at this point. And so my advisor is really taking on that role within the department of, maybe encouraging actual change based on these results. So more to come.
Thank you. And we do have a few more minutes if there are any other questions. But I'll ask another and just thinking if you were to continue on this research, is there a next step or another research question that you either would like to add or wish that you had asked or areas of future research that you're interested in?
Yeah, I think my mind really immediately went to wanting to implement some of these solutions and help faculty design some of these to help address like some of my recommendations. One thing that we are doing on that side of things is my research partner is working on some foundational e-learning modules for like emotional intelligence and kind of building a foundation for soft skills. We're also looking at e-learning modules for beginning adult education skills and the business case. But as far as research, I don't know that I think probably the next question would be, were we successful? Like after implementing some of these solutions, were they successful? So.
Thank you so much. And please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe it's Colorado State that also has a comprehensive industrial hygiene online learning as well. Are you familiar with that?
I am not. I know we have something for ergonomics, I believe, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
For
I thought I'd
industrial
put a
hygiene.
plug out there, and
Okay.
I apologize in advance if I'm mistaking the university, but I think it's Colorado. There's a comprehensive industrial hygiene prep class. So for folks who are looking to get an certified industrial hygienist certification, I know that that is a resource that exists through one of the ERCs, and I'm pretty sure it's Colorado.
Okay. Yeah, I think I may have heard of that. I'm not at the point where I'm looking at doing that, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I wanted to just throw it out there since this seemed like a captured audience. So
yeah.
folks are looking for those certification skills. Um,
Yes, thank you.
um, Great. Oh, and we have in the chat, we have an introduction for or invitation for collaboration. So thank you so much. Um, if we have any, oh, Rocky Mountain Center. Thank you, Paul. It's the Rocky Mountain Center that has the CIH comprehensive. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time and attention. Um, Again, this series is made possible through a collaborative effort of all of the continuing education and research centers throughout the country, and also all of our learners who log in and continue to have interest in these educational opportunities. If folks stop showing up, we'd probably stop doing it. So you all make this possible by coming. So thank you for being here. Special thank you to Jillian for your time and for sharing your research with us. We really appreciate it. As a reminder, you are going to get a follow-up email tomorrow that'll include a link to the evaluation and also to the presentation recording. So you'll be able to check out that recording on our YouTube page and also right on the website page that you registered for the webinar on. And you can check out more upcoming events and upcoming webinars at CUEH at berkeley.edu/about-CE. Thank you all so much again, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.